Welcome to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. Our goal is to help you maximize your church's potential. You'll hear from top leaders in children's, student, and family ministry about the principles and practices they use. Now here's your host, Nick Blevins.
What's up, everybody? It feels like it's been a long time since we've had a podcast after a little hiatus there during the break, so it's good to be back. And this episode is going to be unique. Obviously, usually I'm interviewing a guest and we're talking about a specific area within family ministry or maybe something that impacts all of family ministry. But in today's podcast, it's just going to be me, unfortunately for you. But I'm going to share something with you that I have shared before in like a breakout context. It's all about partnering with parents. It's kind of our strategy for partnering with parents. But then there's this other piece that I had not shared because I'm still wrestling with it and how does this work and how will this help church leaders. I hadn't shared it before until this past week at the Children's Pastors Conference. So I was able to share it in a breakout there, and I look forward to some of those folks emailing me and giving me some of their feedback too. But I would love to hear from you when we get to that part. So there's kind of the 5-part strategy to partnering with parents that I'm going to talk about, and then there's sort of the implementation and what does that look like. I call it like the roadmap. So if you were doing this from scratch, what's the map? What's the step-by-step plan? What's the priority as you implement this stuff? So before I jump into that content, I want to let you know that we have launched the next round of Ministry Boost course registration, and we've added some courses this semester from last year, that weren't there the last time we launched last fall. So course registration's open. You want to register right away if you do want to take a course because there's lots of bonuses that you don't want to miss out on. You can find out more at ministryboost.org. Just click the courses tab, but there's volunteer recruitment. We're giving away the volunteer pipeline, which is an onboarding, kind of like a course to help you onboard volunteers and train them and get them plugged in so you don't lose them in the process. We're giving that away free if you sign up in time with any other course registration. So you don't have to pay for that one. You can get that one free. In addition to, we're going to do the pre-gathering at Orange. So if you're coming to the Orange Conference, you can join us the day before, which was a lot of fun last year. So we're looking forward to that. And some other things too. Some other extras and bonuses are thrown in there with courses. But for example, one course is Cindy Fiala's A Strategy to Partner with Parents, which is going to be a lot of what we talk about here today and how to implement it and walking through that with Cindy. And she has obviously a ton of unique content. I've learned so much from her about partnering with parents that, we're not going to talk about today that you would get in the course. So if you're interested in coaching, we are launching 3 new U-League groups as well. And then, of course, you get a free course with that. So there's just a lot that you can get if you sign up now. We're only going to do this 3 times a year. And so now's the sign up for kind of like the winter heading into spring courses. So you can get all that at ministryboost.org. But let's go ahead now and talk about this 5-part strategy. And when I talk about this strategy, I have to acknowledge up front there's some realities to consider, that parents have the most influence. Partnering with them is critical, which I know you know that. Also that every parent is not at the same stage, right? Every parent is not at the same stage in their parenting, in their faith, in their journey, any of that. So we have to acknowledge that you're never going to have 100% of your parents or even 50% of your parents maybe at the involvement level you would want for them in leading their kids, because you're going to be reaching new folks in your church all the time, and so people will be taking that journey. The other thing is this will always feel like extra, doesn't it? It's not Sunday urgent. And so partnering with parents and helping them and helping them use the time they have with their kids, it always feels like extra. And probably the big thing I want you to realize, and we'll talk about this with the roadmap part, is that you can't do everything. So you have to be intentional. You have to say no to other things so you can do the most important things. And that's kind of what the roadmap will get to. So let's dive into the 5 parts. The goal, I think, overall with your strategy to partner with parents is helping them take one step in leading their children spiritually. One step. Again, if the whole goal is get every parent to this level or doing all these things or all that, you're going to feel like you're failing. Because again, they're at different places in their journey. You don't control what they do. You can only present opportunities and resources and things for them. So the goal is to help them take one step, each individual parent, because there's going to be a different step for each parent, isn't it? So how do you take them one step, help them take one step in leading their children spiritually? So as I go through these 5 parts of the strategy, they're not really in any order, just so you're aware. But the first one we'll talk about is communication. At the end of the day, a partnership is a relationship, and communication is the foundation of that. So I think the goal is to keep parents informed so they're involved and can continue conversations at home. By the way, as I'm talking through this, I'll give you the completed notes and the slides that I used at the breakout, so you don't have to write any of this down if you listen to podcasts like I do when you're on the run. When it comes to communication, I think you have to be intentional about the channels you're using, right? We use email, we use text, Facebook, some Instagram. We even mail things home every now and then. It's very rare, but we do. We use our website, our church website, and our church program. And for me, I think it's helpful to maybe write a word next to those channels for how you want to use it, right? We use email and the program to inform parents. It's like where you're going to get the information about everything. We use text to remind parents. And we use text in church, but there's lots of platforms out there for that. I don't think you should use text as much for like information. You could use it for partnering. We had done that in the past, in the kids' world at least, where we would send a text to remind you to have this conversation, around dinner. But now we use the Parent Cue app, and we primarily use Facebook for partnering with parents. So we don't really do that as much. We do it a little bit with text, but we love to use it to remind parents because it's going to be the most read, most engaged channel. And so we want to use it sparingly and use it well. We celebrate through Instagram, and our website is really geared towards new people if you're not a part of any church. So those are some of the words I'd associate with those channels. And the content you share is really what kids are learning, right? Because you want to keep parents plugged in on that. And then you do want to talk about what's coming up, just not overly salesy. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want it to be all what's coming up. So I think those are really the two content pieces we think about is, what are kids learning and what's coming up. And then here are just some tips. Create a rhythm in your parent communication and stick to it. But every 2 to 3 years, I think you can change it up. And in fact, I think you can get parents to re-engage. If you've run the same play, we email every week on Monday and we send a text on Thursday at 5 p.m. and we put 3 posts on Facebook each week. I mean, like whatever your plan is, I think you could change it up every 2 to 3 years. Just don't change it up every 2 to 3 months. You want parents to get in a rhythm. And we've done every version you can imagine, where each ministry sent their own email on different days, where preschool, elementary, and student ministry was all one email a week, but there were different sections. Our latest version is if you want the kind of, I'll call them parent resources, and what comes in that email, that's a separate email that you have to opt into. And we create it, and we use Orange Curriculum, and so it's piped right into this email, but you have to opt into it. We don't automatically send it to you. And it's a different email. It comes Sunday afternoon or evening. And then once a month, you'll receive an email right from our preschool ministry leader and right from our elementary leader. It looks like it's just written to you, and it's just a text-based email through our church management system. So it looks a little more personal, and they can use that to talk about whatever they want. And the idea is it's not overloaded with stuff, which is helpful. Now, our student ministry sends every other week. So if you're a parent that has kids in preschool, elementary, and student ministry, you'll get an email every week from us. So you'll get one from preschool, one from student ministry, one from elementary, one from student ministry again. And that's because student ministry has more changing things and, is less routine. There's lots of trips and retreats. So they get to email twice a month. But obviously it's a low percentage of parents that have kids in all of those age groups. But the idea is we've planned it all together. So at least within Next Gen World, we don't compete with each other, which I think is another tip. Don't compete with other communication in your church too. For instance, our church sends a weekly email that usually comes from our pastor on Thursdays or Fridays, and nowhere else do we send mass emails on Thursdays or Fridays, just so that we're not competing there. So that's communication. I think communication it's just like a relationship. It's critical. It's foundational. It's low-hanging fruit as you partner with parents. It's really important. Another part of the strategy is resources. This is probably something you think about when you think about partnering with parents. I think the goal is to make it easy for parents to win at home with their kids. And so you can connect them to resources provided by your curriculum. You can connect them to existing resources that you already have in your church. You can connect them to other parent resources that are created by other organizations. I think of like Homeward, Home Point, Focus on the Family, Homefront Magazine, right? And then I think, we use Orange, so we heavily use Parent Cue and everything that has to do with the Phase Project. Those are amazing resources. And I've seen some churches, larger churches, we've had some of them on the podcast actually as guests, where they created their own parent website or portal. The Saddleback Parents website is really good. But again, that's not for everybody. So those are different resources and ways you can use resources. I think we're all kind of familiar with that. But I do think it's an important part of your strategy. It just can't be the only part of your strategy. Another part of the strategy I think of is events. So the goal, I think, is to help parents celebrate as a family and replicate that on their own. And that's key for me. My opinion is not, you may not agree, but for me, when we do an event for parents or for families, I want it to be unique, right? Like they can't go do it anywhere. But at the same time, they could take some of the ideas and go do that on their own as a family next month. So they're not only celebrating as a family, with what we offer as a church, but they could do something similar on their own. One example might be we've done a father-daughter date night, and we've designed it in a way that it's actually something a dad could do with their daughter just on their own if they took them out to their favorite place to eat and had some good conversation and did something fun. Like you could do a lot of the same thing on your own. When I think about events, though, I think about 3 different categories. I think of transition events, so like events that help a kid go from preschool age into elementary, like into kindergarten. In our case, we have an event that is for parents and their new upcoming kindergartners. And it's been great. It's probably one of my favorite partnerships with parents because they come with their kids, which helps them experience the environment for the first time, that Sunday. And then when they're in small group, when those kindergartners go to their small group for the first time, we have the parents separate and we get to talk about what to expect in these years and how we partner with them and what elementary ministry looks like. It's my favorite because it's a smaller group of parents. We get to really connect with them. Think of transitions into middle school, into high school, out of high school, graduating, right? These are all transition events that I think should be part of your strategy to partner with parents. And then there's milestones like baby dedication, salvation and baptism, even milestones. And again, your church doesn't have to do something like this, but we've had on Jeff Henderson to talk about champion tribes and kind of that milestone of kids turning 12 or 13 and dads leaning into their sons at that age and doing something with them, or the milestone of driving. You know what I mean? There's other ways that I know of churches implementing milestones, and we'll have some other guests actually talk about this here coming up soon, into their ministry. So that's a different category of events. So I think there's transitions, milestones, and then there's probably what a lot of you think of as family events, like the father-daughter date night, or we've done a great family experience. It's kind of like an amazing race, but with families doing it together. If you do like an egg extravaganza or fall fest or trunk or treat or whatever. Now, how much does a partner with parents, remains to be seen. You have to evaluate that with your events. But a lot of us probably think of events when you think of partner with parents. And I think they are. I just don't think they're as important maybe some other things, and we'll get to that later. The fourth part of our strategy, and honestly, this is probably the most important. It is the most important for sure. I mean, I think I'd implement it with something else, as you'll see here first, but I think it's the most important. And that's having small group leaders in the lives of kids and students. And I don't mean, like I used to teach Sunday school, right? 7th grade Sunday school. My wife and I taught it before we were married, and I didn't know anything about small group or leading with that model and relational ministry and connecting with those students. I led it like a teacher, and I taught. And I regret that, to this day, because I didn't create the best environment, I don't think, for those 7th graders to learn in and to get connected in, because now, fortunately, we had other things in our student ministry there at the church I grew up in that would help with that. But I wish I'd led that differently, because I think kids, students, adults, we all learn best in the context of small group and relationship. And the goal is to give kids someone who believes in them and to give parents a partner for the long haul. So I think small group leaders are your best partnership with parents. It's the hardest way to do ministry for kids and students, no doubt. The hardest way to do ministry. It's much easier to do a class model or like a rotational volunteer model. If you're using small group leaders, you want them there every week because they're building that relationship. So there's a lot of reasons it's the hardest way to do it. It's also worth it. So worth it. And, I tell so many stories. In fact, before the breakout last week, before I left for Children's Pastors Conference, I was scrolling through Facebook on my phone and I saw a picture of one of our small group leaders and the son of one of our staff members. His name's Nathan. And as soon as I saw the picture, I thought, I already know what this is. This is this rock star small group leader, Debbie, showing up in Nathan's life at one of his sports things. I don't even have to read the caption yet. I just know because that's what great small group leaders do in our church. And sure enough, I read the caption that said, Debbie wrote, got to watch this guy and his team pull out a great come from behind win. Way to go, Nathan. Love when I get to see some of my kids in their activities. Thanks for giving me a schedule. Love watching them. So it's just awesome. Like you just can't beat that. And at the Children's Pastors Conference, I shared numerous stories about how small group leaders have partnered with parents. And I'll just give you one. Years ago, we had a small group leader named Jenna who was leading second graders. So it's boys and girls. And, she'd been leading them for a while, probably 4 or 5 months that school year. And when they got to the time at the end of the service, when they were going to pray, it's kind of like you would think with second graders, lots of praying for parents and grandparents, and especially if there's health issues or pets or, something they want or school or whatever. But this time it was different. The prayer request was different because one of the second graders shared that his parents were getting a divorce. And in that moment, a couple things happened that were powerful. One is about half the kids in the group have been in a similar situation. Their parents are either divorced or separated, or they've been through that some point in their past, and they talked about it. So this child got to realize I'm not alone, that there's others in the group who even understand how I feel. And so it was great for the group to get to just talk about that openly. And then on top of that, the partnership, though, happened later. We didn't know about any of this until after Jenna told us after the fact. Later that night, Jenna called the mom of that son. And we all know that could go any number of ways, right? Because mom probably didn't even know that her son said anything. And you just don't know how that's going to go. But we equip our small group leaders with parent contact information, again, to really forge that partnership. And so she called her, and, man, they had a great conversation. Her and mom talked for an hour. And mom was so thankful, to have somebody to talk to and this partner with her. And I'm just telling you, you can't replace that with anything else I'm going to talk about. You can't. That's the best. It's the hardest, probably, of all the things we're going to talk about, but it's the best. So that's why I think putting small group leaders in the lives of kids, even though it doesn't feel like partnering with parents, it feels like a whole different strategy, and it kind of is. It is the best. It is the best thing you can do. So I definitely, you'll see as we get to the roadmap where I put that. So those are 4 parts of the strategy. The 5th part is community. And I think the goal is giving parents, some other parents, to help them realize they're not as bad or crazy as they think. Not really. That's actually not the goal. But there's some truth to that I just need to get around other parents and realize, I'm not crazy. I think the real goal is to give parents a place to belong and a community that encourages and challenges them, right? It challenges them a little bit too. And so under this community piece, I think you could have parenting classes. You've seen churches do that. Small groups for parents, which would be huge. We've done coffee talks where parents come just 20 or 30 minutes early to whatever it is, or maybe stick around 30 minutes late to a service or to a student ministry gathering. It worked really well in our student ministry gathering. And we connect them with the small group leaders, and we share 10 minutes of helpful content. Like coffee talks to me are kind of like the short, simple version of a parenting class, or even like we've done small group parent leader lunches or breakfasts where we organize a time for parents to sit with their kids' small group leader. And those are great. I love those. But the coffee talk is just a shorter, easier version to pull off. Community can even happen through Facebook groups. We have 2 small group leaders, one in kids and one in student ministry, who just decided to make a Facebook group for the parents of the kids in their group, which we thought that's awesome. And we didn't go and try to implement it ministry-wide, though I think that would be great. We're just letting them run with it, and it's been really, really cool. You can have small group parent gatherings that are led by the small group leader, right? Where you get all the parents together and the kids, or just parents, and have some conversations. A lot of churches, you know of, your church may do this. You may have like a marriage ministry if your church is large enough, and marriage enrichment. So there's different things you're doing to help marriages, not just parenting. I would put that under this banner of community as your partner with parents. So those are the 5 parts of the strategy. And some of that, I hope that's helpful to you as you're thinking about what do you do and what could you do, or whatever. But here's the part where I want to kind of shift gears, talk about a roadmap. How do you implement this, and what order would I implement it in? And so if you download the notes, the completed notes on the side of each thing, because there's like the strategies, right? There's like community, and then underneath the strategy, there's specific ideas. On the side of the notes, I put little numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And those are the kind of the order I would implement it in. So I think of them as like mile markers. So, mile marker 1, the first things I think you need to do is establish the communication and the small group leaders. To do those two things that alone would be a massive partnership with parents. And so implement those two. Now, granted, it's really hard. The communication is not as hard. The small group leader thing is really hard. But that's okay. It's the first mile marker. It may take you a couple years to really implement that. I would say it took us, a couple years to implement small group leaders a long time ago. It took years and years, though, for the culture to be what it is, where leaders show up in kids' lives like we talked about with Debbie. So I think that's mile marker 1, communication and small group leaders. Mile marker 2 would be transitions and milestones. So pulling those events out, that we talked about and implementing them in your ministry. Mile marker 3, and this is where I don't know if I agree with myself, I'll probably change this, is resources and what I called simple connections. Now, the reason I might change this is it's so easy to share parent resources if you're just getting them from like Orange or your curriculum or whatever. It's so easy, it's hard to not put it higher. So I think I could see making that mile marker 2 along with transitions, and then moving milestones here to 3 with simple connections. In fact, as I say it out loud, I think that's probably what I do. So my notes will say something different. The slides will say something different. But I think that might be what I do, so that it's kind of like transitions, because I think they're so important, and resources, maybe mile marker 2, and then get milestones and simple connections. Simple connections meaning like Facebook groups for parents, coffee talks, like the easier version of getting parents to connected to each other and to small group leaders. Mile marker 4 would be like the other types of events. Think family events, father-daughter date night, egg extravaganza, like those bigger events where you're getting families together, and small groups and classes. I think that's mile marker 4, fourth thing in the list that I would do. And the fifth thing is like the parent and marriage ministry, mentoring, like all of that. Again, I think that's great, but most churches are not going to have that. And again, you'll see why here in just a second. And then like those parent hubs, like we have a website just for parents. I've been working on a project for a long time trying to make this easier for church leaders, the whole parent hub and resources thing. So I hope to someday, not too long, get that thing released, and maybe it'll help all of us, resource parents better. But otherwise, if you're doing it yourself, I just think it's the last thing because it's so complicated. Now, here's another part that you may agree or disagree with. I took those 5 mile markers and put them according to church size. Now, this is all on the slides. I don't think these later things are in the handout. I might try to paste it in there before I share it with you. So think about it like this. If your church is under 200 in size, then I think mile marker 1 is where you live: communication and small group leaders. And if it's under 200, you probably know a lot. You probably know almost everybody in the church anyway. So it's more relational leadership, like in relational communication. You don't have to use all the communication channels the same way you would if your church was 2,000, because most people know each other. Now, you don't know everybody, so there's some sense where that's not true. But I think mile marker 1 is where you live with the churches that are under 200. And before I go on any further, one thing I referenced in the breakout that I'll say here is that there's a great article by Tim Keller called Church Size Culture, and it's the idea that churches of different sizes have different cultures. And he suggests, and I agree, that for example, a Baptist church of 200 is more similar to the, let's say, Methodist church of 200 than the Baptist church of 200 is to the Baptist church of 1,000. Meaning that church size culture is even more important than like denominational, culture. Now, there's some nuance to that. It's not completely true. But my experience is that's largely true. Church size really, really impacts the culture. And the key is it's not good or bad. It's not good or bad. Larger church isn't better. Smaller church isn't better. They're different, and they have strengths and weaknesses. So when you're thinking about partnering with parents, though, I think it's important to go back to what I said in the beginning, which is you can't do everything. So you got to be intentional. So if you're under 200, I think mile marker 1 is for you, communication and small group leaders. If you're like 200 to 400, I think in that range you could do mile marker 1 and then implement mile marker 2, transitions and milestones, or maybe since I changed it, it's transitions and resources. And then 400 to 600 is resources and connections. You can get that third mile marker in there now because you're a little bit larger of a church. You need the transitions in place so people get from one stage, phase to the next. And you want to help parents celebrate the milestones, but you can also start to connect them a little bit more. And then this is a big range, 600 to like 1,500, maybe even 2,000. That's when you could totally have events, like family events, parent events, groups and classes, and all of that. I think if you're a church, and our church didn't really implement the groups and classes until we were probably about 800 in size. And even then, we have a guy who leads a lot of them. It's just amazing. And I don't know, if he wasn't at our church, I don't know if I would implement that 800. I may have waited till we were 1,200 or something like that, because it is a lot of work. And then 1,500 plus or 2,000 plus, that's that mentoring, marriage ministry, parent hubs. I don't see a lot of that happening in churches under 2,000. And in fact, a lot of them are even larger than that if they're doing it and doing it well. Because again, you could do all this stuff. It's just you won't do it all as well because it will be diluted with the effort. Keep in mind that 98% of churches are under 1,000. So, most churches, if they're just doing the top 3 mile markers, I think you're in really good shape. There. So that's kind of my take on that. I've presented the 5-part strategy before in breakouts. But this is the first time I've tried to attach this roadmap idea to it, and then even church size and what that looks like. So I would love to hear your thoughts and your feedback. I expect people to push back. Like, wait a minute, our church is 300 and we totally do mile marker 4, which is great. I think this isn't like you have to do it this way. Obviously, I'm just now making it up and then trying to form it and everything. I think it's more like it's a guide. And then if you are a church that's a certain size, I also hope it's a little bit free. Like you look at it and you're like, oh, I feel a little bit more free now because I don't feel the pressure to do all those things. And what I would say is, yes, that is my goal. You shouldn't do all of those things because you have other things to do too. You still have your ministry to lead. So there it is. I would love your feedback. We'll put the notes and documents and stuff in the show notes that you can download so you can read that and give me some more feedback. Let me know what you think. Before we sign off, just a reminder again, Ministry Boost course registration is open. It's only open for a short time though. And especially if you want the bonuses, you want to register now. Those bonuses go away. Some of them do. Some of them are always there, even if you register not till the deadline. So the deadline is February 7th, but some of the bonuses go away before that. So you don't want to wait. If you want to sign up, take a course. If you want to do coaching and get the course free, definitely sign up now at ministryboost.org. So yeah, give me your feedback, give me your thoughts. Love to hear your thoughts on this. We all want to partner with parents better. I feel like we're all throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. I've tried to think through this strategy so that at least in our church as we approach this, there's a plan to it. But then this other stuff about the roadmap too is very new. And I'm mostly using that working with other churches to try to help them implement this in priority order and then also not feel the pressure, to do more than they really should be doing. So thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing. Ready and excited for another year of the podcast here. Got lots of guests already recording interviews and lined up. And so we have plenty to share this year. So I appreciate you listening. Hope it's helpful for your ministry.
Thanks for listening to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. We hope this helps you maximize your church's potential. We would love to hear stories of how you apply what you've learned. You can do that by leaving a comment on iTunes or in the show notes at nickblevins.com.